In this video today, we are going to talk about how to survive a love with sexual addiction. So what is a sex addict? By way of definition, a sex addict is often described as a person who has a compulsive need to perform sexual acts in order to achieve a fix that a person with alcohol use disorder or substance use disorder gets from using drugs. So sexual addiction, the compulsive behavior that I'm describing, shouldn't be confused with disorders like pedophilia or bestiality. For some people, sex addiction can be extremely dangerous and can result in considerable difficulties with relationships. Just like someone with drug or alcohol dependence, there is a potential for a negative impact to occur within a person's physical, mental, and personal relationships and well-being. It is pretty common, even though the research shows otherwise. This is addiction that many times is not diagnosed. There's also a common belief that someone with sex addiction typically has multiple partners. However, this is not always the case. Some people experience sex addiction as a compulsive need to masturbate, view pornography, or to be in sexually stimulating situations very frequently. So you might be wondering, is sex addiction real? So sex addicts aren't people that just love to have tons and tons of sex. Typically, there are a lot of underlying problems like anxiety, stress, shame, depression, trauma, and these challenges typically drive the risky sexual behavior. Typically, by the time a sex addict gets into treatment, these underlying conditions are addressed, and this helps to treat the sex addiction. So why is sex addictive? Some sex and relationship experts report that people can become addicted to the enjoyable feeling of sex or the high that is experienced during sex and during sexual activity. Another reason why sex could be considered addictive is looking at it from the process addiction standpoint. A process addiction is an addiction that occurs when you get addicted to actually doing something. So this can be sex, gambling, overeating. Technically, you can get addicted to any type of behavior, but certain behaviors are much more addictive than others. Another very commonly asked question is what causes sex addiction? If you look at it from a biopsychosocial lens, this can really show how sex addiction can develop due to factors that encompass all different aspects of a person's life. So if you look at the person's biology, you might have a genetic predisposition to having emotional regulation, impulsive behavior, or sensation-seeking behavior. You could also have hormones. As you might expect, higher levels of sex hormones like testosterone or estrogen can impact your libido. The second part of the biopsychosocial model is looking at it from the psychological perspective. So there are environmental influences like early life environmental factors such as adverse childhood experiences or exposure to sexual content when you're very young. There's mental health factors. So if you struggle with anxiety or depression, if you have poor impulse control, performance anxiety, or personality disorders, many times those are issues that simultaneously occur with a sex addiction. The last lens is a social lens. So social isolation can be a big social factor that could lead to sexual addiction. So social isolation actually increases one's likelihood of seeking inappropriate ways of being sexually gratified. Another social factor is social learning. So if you identify with a friend or groups of friends or people that are close to you that are highly sexual and you identify with them, this can lead to developing a sexual addiction. So the next question is something that we have been asked so many times, and it's, can a sex addict actually be faithful in a relationship? So typically, sex addicts can find it really challenging to stay committed to their partners, even if they are aware that their pursuit of sex can lead to neglect or lying or spending money irresponsibly. Many times, the immediate gratification is the priority, and the consequences of those behaviors can be an afterthought. Even though sex addicts could have the best intentions for their partners and for their relationships, it's still so important that they seek out sex addiction treatment so they can address these underlying conditions that fuel the sexual addiction, so they can work on moving from being in a place of active addiction into being in a place of recovery. Our team at Makin Wellness can help. Another very commonly asked question is, how do you know if you are a sex addict? So I'm going to go over a couple of different factors, but I want to preface this by saying the only way you can really know for sure is by seeking out treatment and asking a professional counselor or social worker, because ultimately everyone experiences sex addiction in different ways. So one way of knowing that you're a sex addict is that sex constantly is dominating your life, and that is your number one priority, that you may be engaging in sexual activities that could be considered inappropriate or very risky, such as like public sex, sex with prostitutes, going to different sex clubs, and various things like that. If you feel a constant urge for having sex, and then also having feelings of regret or depression or shame or anxiety attached to that. If you are constantly engaging in sex when you have alone time, so like using like phone sex or porn or computer sex. If you engage in sex with multiple partners, and or if you're having extramarital affairs. And if you are masturbating habitually when you are at home. So how do you deal with sex addiction as an addict and as a lover? The number one thing that we recommend is to help your partner or yourself get into sex addiction treatment. Again, you can call our team at Makin Wellness at 833-274-HEAL. And we have an entire team of highly rated providers that specialize in sex addiction that can help you heal and become happy again. Another very commonly asked question is, how do you treat sexual addictions? There are a couple of recommendations we have. The first recommendation is to get into online counseling at Makin Wellness. More than likely, your provider is going to use cognitive behavioral therapy to help you address the underlying causes of the sex addiction. Cognitive behavioral therapy is an evidence-based treatment, which means that there's tons of research that have been done to prove its efficacy. Another recommendation we have is to become a part of Sex Addicts Anonymous. This is a 12-step program that will help you for alcohol and substance use addiction. The benefit of it is that you get to connect with other people that are struggling with the same thing. Hopefully this information will help you to survive loving someone with sexual addiction. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them below. And if you are ready to get help with your sexual addiction, please give our team a call at 833-274-HEAL, and we will help you heal and become happy again.